Erica. Didn't see you there. Do you know what acid rain is? What is acid rain? Acid rain is precipitation containing high amounts of acidic solutions. In the 17th century, a scientist named John Evelyn first noted the effects of acid rain. Then in 1852, a man named Robert Angus Smith noticed the relationship between pollution and acid rain. Acid rain is formed from the emissions released from factories. As factories run, they emit high amounts of nitrogen oxides, sulfur dioxide, ammonia, and carbon dioxide. The nitrogen oxides and sulfur dioxide react with water vapor to form acids such as sulfuric acid, nitric acid, nitrous acid, and sulfurous acid. The sulfuric acid, nitric acid, and ammonium nitrate in the rain is corrosive to the environment. They raise the acidity in lakes, rivers, soil, and other habitats for animals. Many animals can't live in environments that are too acidic, such as fish. They live in an environment that has a pH between 7 and 8. Acid rain changes the pH, making it too acidic for the fish. Acid rain is also corrosive to plants and buildings. For example, marble is mainly made of calcium carbonate. The acid reacts with the marble, causing it to corrode.
Okay, so we are now going to run a lab demonstrating the effects of acids on substances found in the city and natural environment.
Now we're going to do a lab on nitric acid and sulfuric acid. We're going to test the reactions between these acids with common substances found on Earth. So there's sulfuric acid and nitric acid. And for our materials, we have calcium carbonate, carbon, charcoal, iron filings, leaves, and quartz, and also roots.
Other materials that we used in our experiment were test tubes, test tube rack, pipette, a hammer to smash the quartz, distilled water, and we also used gloves to handle the acids.
To prepare for the materials, the quartz had to be crushed in order to fit into the test tubes, and the leaves were washed so any contaminant would be eliminated. Also, the leaves had to be torn into small pieces. Now we're going to put distilled water into the materials to simulate the effect regular rain has on them. This is the control experiment and should not have any effect on the materials tested.
As you can see, none of the materials have a reaction with the water.
Now we're going to be testing nitric acid.
So here's the reaction between nitric acid and quartz. There seems to be no reaction. Here's the reaction between nitric acid and leaves, and there seems to be no apparent reaction at this moment. Here's the iron filings. There are small bubbles. The calcium carbonate is starting to fizz, as you can see.
Now we're going to be testing sulfuric acid.
So here's the reaction between the quartz and the sulfuric acid, and the leaves and the sulfuric acid, the iron filings and the sulfuric acid. Here we have the carbon and the roots, and there is no reaction, and the calcium carbonate, it was bubbling. The reaction after 5 minutes.
Here's the reaction of calcium carbonate and water after 5 minutes, and here's sulfuric acid. There's a reaction and the calcium carbonate seems to have dissolved into the sulfuric acid. And the same for nitric acid, but nitric acid seems to have less of a reaction for calcium carbonate because the liquid is less cloudy. Here's carbon and water. There's not much reaction, but the carbons is a little cloudy in the water. And the same for sulfuric acid, there's no reaction. And there's no reaction for nitric acid either. So for iron and water, there was no reaction as predicted. And for sulfuric acid, there was a strong reaction, and there's gas emissions from the iron filings, and it seems to be dissolving in the sulfuric acid. For nitric acid, there's a reaction too, and the acid is a little yellow, and there's a little gas. The leaves and water looked normal and green, and there's no change in them. For sulfuric acid, there's a clear change between the original green and now, which is brown. Same for nitric acid, they look very unhealthy. For quartz, there's no reaction for water, no reaction for sulfuric acid or nitric acid. So for the roots in water was normal and nothing seemed to happen. The water is still clear. And for sulfuric acid, the roots are a little discolored and swollen in the sulfuric acid. So this might be what happens when acid rain gets into the soil. And the water is also a little bit yellow for sulfuric acid. And for nitric acid, the liquid is really yellow as well, and the roots seem less swollen than sulfuric acid.
So after this experiment, we were able to conclude that sulfuric acid was the most reactive compared to nitric acid and water. However, most of the reactions were very similar. When the acids were poured with the calcium carbonate and the iron filings, the most apparent reactions occurred with the sulfuric acid. Substances did not react with water, and there were also no reactions recorded with quartz and carbon. This experiment shows how corrosive acid rain can be, and how much it can damage the environment. By simply reducing our factories' emissions, we can prevent
consequences. And that is what acid rain is.
Thanks, Kat.
You're welcome.